Yeah, the ones that are planted in Las Vegas that cause a lot of problems are mulberry trees, olive trees, pine trees, and ash trees. In fact, ash trees are our most commonly planted tree here in Las Vegas, and we've put a lot of these in our area that cause a lot of our allergy problems, unfortunately.
Why are these particular trees pollen problem children? It boils down to reproduction. These trees want to reproduce, and to do this, the male plants must move their pollen to female plants. And since they can't get up and walk around, these trees have come up with other methods of pollen delivery.
They put a lot of pollen into the air because they're wind pollinated. So what they do is they'll put a lot of pollen into the air in hopes that one of those pollen grains will land on an appropriate female receptacle on another plant. So billions of pollen gets put into the air.
Did that surprise you? Many of us don't typically think of trees when considering allergy and pollen sources. In fact, it's often those plants with large flowers that are blamed, but they're not our allergy culprits.
Plants that have large, showy flowers are pollinated by birds and bees and insects and those sorts of things. So those plants produce very small amounts of pollen, and they're sticky little clumps of pollen that are supposed to get stuck on an insect and travel around that way. So they do not put pollen into the air. So if you see a plant that has a nice, big, showy flower on it, you are not going to be suffering from pollen allergies because of that plant.
Determining if a plant or tree is male or female is a great start to help deter allergy problems, and checking with your local nursery is the best way to ensure you're getting female plants instead of male ones. But there are also a few visual cues that can help you spot male and female plants.
If you have a plant that flowers and then it produces a fruit, that is your female. Then you also have those plants that have flowers with no fruit, and those are your male. So chances are, if you have plants that have flowers that attract bees or other pollinators, those are the ones that are not going to really cause you problems because the pollen is gathered on those specific insects or other animals.
When wind-blown pollen hits your nose instead of another plant, your body reacts to the foreign invader and you get allergies. Fortunately, allergy season in the desert is relatively short, between March and the end of May, with the occasional resurgence in the fall. These months are when growing plants are at their strongest and put a lot of pollen into the air, and they tend to be our windiest seasons too, making these allergy seasons pack a wallop. So what can you do when it's the time of the year for an allergen assault? First, make sure it's really pollen you're allergic to.
It could be dust, it could be dander, or it could be like dust mites. You can go to the local pollen tracker and it will tell you what's really high pollen in our area for that specific time. And then that way you can see what's really bothering you.
When pollen is on the wing, the dry desert air means the only thing that's going to get rid of it is a good rainstorm. So if pollen is your assailant, remember that there's no shame in taking cover.
Unfortunately, you have to generally keep your doors and windows closed, prevent air from getting in, and have a good filtration system in your home.
But for those allergy sufferers who don't want to retreat indoors, there is another option. Sure, no one can re-landscape the entire valley, but homeowners can make a major impact in their own yards. Plant flowering or fruiting trees over non-flowering ones. Make sure any native plants you own are not wind-pollinated. Finally, you can mow the flowering heads off pollen-producing grasses, and if you're serious about switching out sniffle-inducing turf for a less volatile landscape, you may be able to get some help.
And the other thing you could do is get your grass removed and replaced with a nice landscape that is full of showy flowers that will never produce pollen problems for you.
We do have a rebate program with SNWA to help get rid of some of the turf so you can plant things that wouldn't cause allergies.
Shoring up your yard against potent pollen doesn't mean giving up on beauty either. While not everything on display at the Springs Preserve Gardens are necessarily low allergen, there are enough ideas there, along with landscaping classes, that will prove inspirational should you choose to take your defense against pollen to the next level.
If you know going into this that certain plants are going to be great for not producing pollen, all the cactus, all the succulents, all of the great blooming shrubs and penstemons and springtime bloomers we have here, then you can see what's growing in Springs Preserve and you can implement that in your own yard.